So today we're going to do a Q&A. So I'll get lots of questions all the time on the channel. I've also put a message up on Facebook as well, asking people to send me their questions. So if you do enjoy this style of video, remember to give the video a like and also subscribe to the channel, and I can do more of these videos in the future. So let's get straight into the questions then. So the first question is from Pablo Lopez. In terms of aiming practice, do you think that video games like Pro Snooker 2020 are useful? I think it's very interesting to disable the age so that it becomes more realistic. I wanted to know your opinion about that. So I'm not 100% sure exactly how the aiming works on these games because I don't actually play Pro Snooker 2020, but in real snooker, we do a lot of our aiming from the standing position. So I would say that 90% of our aiming is done before we even get down to the table. So if they're aiming where you're above the shot, so you're in the game, if you're aiming from the standing position, then it can be quite useful because you're getting used to standing in the right position, judging those, judging the potting angles that way. If it's that you're actually judging the potting angle by being levelled down on the shot, that's a little bit different to the way we're doing a lot of our aiming when we're actually on the snooker table. So I think it can be beneficial. You're definitely getting a little bit used to looking at some potting angles, but there's certainly no substitute here for playing on the table, because the more experience you get looking in real life, in 3D, at the different potting angles, the better you will get at judging them. So I think the game possibly helps a little bit, but there's certainly no substitute for practicing on the table. Okay, the next question is from Tony and Guy. Can you talk a bit more about lining up the shoulder behind the head with perfect alignment? This has actually bugged me for years. No matter how much I twisted the body, it's still a little bit at my right-hand side, right-handed. So this is interesting. I see lots of players all the time that don't twist the shoulders enough when they're down on the shot. So the consequence of that is that you see the right shoulder very visible because the shoulders aren't quite twisted enough. A really good way I found of thinking about this is that, so I'm facing the camera now, I'm looking directly down the line of what would be the shot here. So the good way of thinking about this is when I get down on the shot, and also one more point on this, I actually found this quite difficult to do myself when I first started playing. So I got a lot of things pretty good with my technique, but then I found that getting the shoulders twisted, I had exactly the same problem. I found it quite difficult to do it consistently well. So one of the really big things that helped me was, the way to think about it is that when you're getting down on the shot, so this is for me as a right-handed player, I want my chest to be pointing away from me over to the right-hand side. So when I get down on the shot, I'm trying to point my chest away from the shot so that my chest is facing over there, and then my body still, my arms and my bridge hand and my back arm is still pointing along the line of the shot. So that's one way I found it really, it was much better for me when I started thinking about it in terms of where I pointed my chest. So you have to try and get your right shoulder back, really get the chest pointed away from the line of the shot, and that then really helps to get your alignment right. What you can't do, and I see this very often, is you can't just get down on the shot as you normally would and then just pull the arm back, because that just puts the arm into the wrong position and we don't want that. So good question, that one. Okay, the next question is from Neparis. I think that's how you pronounce that. So don't know if you've covered it before, Steve, but if not, then maybe a short explanation on the grip and how tightly the cue should be held, including the importance of the first three or the final two fingers. Thanks for doing these at this time. So thanks a lot for the question again. So what's really important with the grip, first thing to say is that the grip is very important, because the grip is the only thing that's actually going to control the cue at the back. So it's very important that we try and get this right. So most players are going to grip the cue with the finger and thumb at the front there. They're going to use that lock in there round the cue, and that's going to be a constant all the way through the cue delivery. Some players grip a little bit more with the middle two fingers. Nothing wrong with that as well. I actually grip a little bit more with the, definitely this second finger here, and probably the middle two is where I get a lot of the feel of my grip. What you don't really want to do is grip in the neutral position, so in our address position when we're actually down on the shot. You don't want to feel like the cue is in the back of the hand, really. You want to feel like you're doing it more in the front finger or the middle two fingers. Now, in terms of the pressure, you want not too hard here. So I always call my grip about a 4 or a 5, something like that. You always feel like you're holding the cue, but if someone was to try and pull the cue out of your hand, it should slide out of the hand reasonably easily. You wouldn't want to feel like the pressure is so tight that somebody couldn't get the cue out of your hand if they tried to pull it. So it's reasonable. You don't want it too loose. Some people end up really relaxing it and then dangling it in the fingers. We don't want that. We want the hand all the way around the cue, but we still want it quite relaxed. In terms of the way the grip then operates when we play a shot, when you play the shot, you want the back fingers to relax very slightly, almost like the cue is just naturally pushing those fingers out the way. That helps to keep the cue a little bit flatter as we do the backswing. And then when the grip then comes back around the cue, some people think of it as doing a bit of a squeeze. Very, very rare we need to squeeze the cue. We do on very high powered shots, but for a lot of shots, all we need to do is just let the hand naturally close around the cue again. So sometimes when you're watching the professionals, it might look like they've closed the hand and squeezed the cue, but it's just the hand naturally closing again. Don't try not to introduce there too much pressure on your grip hand. So I hope that's answered some of your questions there about the grip. Okay, so next question here is from Drums the Word. He's also got a YouTube channel, so have a look at that YouTube channel if you haven't seen it. This question is: I'm 6'2" and I have really bad posture. I find it impossible to bend my back into the accepted posture once my legs are in position. What do you think? Have you come across this before at all? So, yep, I see a lot of players that are quite tall players, over 6 foot, 6'2", and there's a couple of things that I always advise players to do here. One is that you want to have a bit of a wider stance. Obviously, if you're a shorter player, you don't need the feet to be as wide because it's much easier for you to get down on the table properly. If you're a taller player, then if you get the feet wider apart, that's going to help you to get a little bit lower down to the table. So that'll be a good advantage. And then the second thing that you want to do is not worry too much. So for right-handed players, we normally keep the right leg straight. So we completely keep that right leg locked. For tall players, I sometimes say, don't worry about locking that leg completely. You can have a little bit of a bend in that leg, and that'll just help you to get down again a little bit lower to the table and try and get everything right. Locking the leg, it's useful. What we do when we play snooker, we try and get as many things right as we possibly can. So it's definitely useful to lock that leg because that helps keep everything nice and solid. But for tall players, I actually find it could be detrimental because it's making them struggle to get low enough to the table. So another really good question there. So Cameron Khan, the next question, which cue tip is good, 9mm or 10mm tip for the cue? Again, I think I've covered this in a different video where I talked about personal preference quite a lot when it comes to cues and things. And really here it comes down to what you prefer. If you use a smaller tip, it's arguably a little bit more difficult to hit the centre of the cue ball, and effects of not hitting the centre of the cue ball are more exaggerated. So if you've got a smaller tip, if you're not quite right in the centre of the cue ball, you can possibly throw the cue ball offline a little bit easier. So that's why some players will prefer using a larger diameter tip. And you'll see some of the professionals, Peter Ebden is one example I can think of. He uses a tip that actually overhangs his ferrule slightly. So he lets it's called a mushroom tip, and he lets the tip overhang the ferrule, so he's just got a little bit more of the tip contact in the cue ball. So no one is right or wrong really, but there's maybe a benefit for going for a 10mm tip, slightly bigger diameter, because it's just a little bit easier to hit centre ball and the effects of side spin are less exaggerated. Okay, so the last question I'm going to cover in this video today is from Rory O'Connor, and he says, potting angles, how to consistently know where to aim. So this is a common question, and my answer to this really is that don't fall into the trap that there's a clever or a scientific or a particular special way of aiming that good players or professional players are using. It's really all down to experience. So when we're picking out potting angles and picking the line of aim, a way to think about this is you are effectively guessing the potting angle. It's just that what good players end up doing is they guess that potting angle very, very accurately based on lots of experience. So if you imagine it like this, if you were to think of, you've got lots of, your brain is like a computer database. You've got lots of successful shots here, and then you've got lots of unsuccessful shots that you've played here, and then somewhere in the middle, you're, from that experience that you've got, you're picking what you think is the correct line of aim. So that's the way you do it, based on experience. And one more thing about this, when we're aiming shots at snooker, 90% of our aiming is done in the standing up position. So we're standing up over the shot, and that's how we more effectively pick out the potting angle. So if I just bring a picture on the screen here, I covered this in a video when I was talking about learning potting angles. A way to think about it is we're standing behind the white, and obviously we can see in that standing position where we could stand too far over at the one side and we wouldn't even hit the object ball at all. We can see where we would stand and we would hit the object ball full in the face. And then what we do is, we know somewhere in between those two extremes, there's somewhere where we can stand that we will be in the middle of those two extremes, and we feel like that's pretty close to potting the ball. So do all of your aiming in the standing up position. Once you get down on the table, trust that you've done that aiming correctly, and then get your feedback. Watch where the object ball goes. If it goes a bit thick, you know for next time, okay, I'll readjust, I'll adjust my potting angle, I'll try and go a little bit thinner. One last thing to say, also always try and play the shot nice and soft, not too hard, with consistent cueing. Stay down on the shot. What you don't want to do is hit shots too hard, lose a bit of feel in your cue action, try and deliver the cue too fast so that the cue could come offline. We want to try and keep the cueing as simple as possible, nice and still on the shot, so that we can just practice our aiming and get better at that. So thanks everybody that sent questions in. I think I'm going to do a few more of these over the next few days, because I've got lots of other questions that people have sent in. If you did enjoy this style of video, as I say, please give the video a like, that really helps. If you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel as well. That also just really helps me to keep this content coming. And everybody, please stay safe in these difficult times. Thanks for watching. Cheers.